The first historical objection of Jesus is really the Messiah, wasn't there peace on earth? And we explained that what traditional Judaism is looking for is the first act is actually the second act. What they're expecting is the beginning of the story is actually the end of the story. But does it make sense, though, that wars, famines, and everything have increased since Jesus the Messiah came into the world? I mean, is that how it works? Now, there is an interesting rabbinic concept that the earth will get completely sinful or completely righteous before the Messiah comes. And there's even rabbinic teaching that the whole world will become heretical, quote, Christian is what you would think is meant there, based on the laws in Leviticus about sara'at, the severe skin disease, normally translated leprosy, but not leprosy as we know it today, that if the person was white from head to toe, they were then clean. So that the whole world would apostatize before Messiah came. So obviously from a very, very different point of view, there are rabbinic traditions that seem to indicate this possibility that the world would become completely wicked. You say, yeah, but that's still before Messiah comes in Jewish thinking. Yeah, but I'm making a point that there's the idea that the world could turn to righteousness or the world could turn to wickedness, or the Jewish people turn to righteousness or the world turn to wickedness before the Messiah comes. But I want to take this a little further. In Matthew, the 10th chapter, Jesus says something very striking. He says that he came to set a father against son, mother against daughter, father-in-law against son-in-law, to paraphrase. He's quoting Micah 7. You say, what? Came to bring family division? In other words, the coming of Messiah into the world would bring family division. But what's fascinating is, about 150 years after Matthew recorded that's recorded in the Mishnah at the end of the tractate Sota, saying that on the heels, the footsteps of the coming of the Messiah, right as he's getting closer, that these things would happen. There'd be terrible wickedness in the world. And the Micah 7 passage is quoted about family division. So it's interesting to see that this idea of chaos or family division or wickedness in the world, right leading up to the coming of Messiah, is even found in rabbinic tradition. So I would say, leading up to his return, we could expect to see these things. But here's what's happened. Since the Messiah has come into the world, two things have happened. We've continued to have a revelation of human wickedness, of human sin, of human rebellion, of the fruit of sin and apostasy, and we've continued to see an increase of the positive influence of the mission of Jesus Messiah on the world. Now, this is something that you may not have realized, but let me point this out. Let's look at the idea that the Messiah is a light to the nations and that he will increasingly function as a light to the nations, more and more Gentiles coming to worship the God of Israel before his return. Isn't it interesting to see that Jesus, Yeshua, is the most influential Jew who ever lived? That he is the most famous rabbi, not rabbi in a traditional sense, but charismatic Jewish leader called rabbi in the first century, the most famous rabbi who ever lived, and that through him more Gentiles have come to worship the God of Israel than through any other Jew. I've run into this around the world. It's very touching to me. I've been overseas on maybe 130 plus trips around the world. And I was in India my first time, been there now 20 times as of this recording. I was in India the first time in 1993, and out of the 5 of us there, including my wife Nancy, 3 of us were Jews that were on this trip. And we were going to be having a meal at a man's home. He was a government official, so he had a home with running water and better things than a lot of the places where we were staying. And when we get to the door, he greets us at the door. I've told this story many times. It's just one of my favorite, with a big smile. His wife had not slept all night. She was so excited that she was having Jews in her home. This is the way Christians relate to us around the world. Great love for the Jewish people. He's got a big smile. He greets us at the door. He said, "You are the second Jew to come into my home. The first was Jesus." And here it is. He loves Israel and loves the Jewish people. I've run into this around the world. I've run into it in Mexico. I've run into it in Italy. I've run into Korea. I've run into it in Sweden. Run into it in Mombasa, Kenya. Christians with a profound love for the God of Israel and for the Jewish people because of Jesus, Yeshua. And that is increasing. If there's anything to this notion about we're getting closer and closer to the end of the age as we come to the end of 6,000 years on the Jewish calendar in the 5700s now, if there's any truth to that calendar, wow, isn't this interesting? Consider this. Some stats. It's estimated by the end of the first century, there was one follower of Yeshua for every 360 or so people. By the time you get to AD 1430, it's about 1 to 99 instead of 1 out of 360, about 1 out of 100. Then, by the time you get to AD 1790, it's increased. Now it's about 1 to 49. Then when you get to 1940, it's about 1 to 32. You get to 1960, it's about 1 in every 24. 1980, 1 in every 16. But by the time you get to 1995, 1 in 8. Now, 2013, as I record this, maybe 1 in 6 in the world's population, a follower of Jesus. Oh, and professing followers of Jesus. So I'm saying, let's say half of them are not true followers, but professing followers, about 1 in 3. Interesting. Very, very interesting. There has been an increase in the knowledge of God going out into the world. Can I tell you also, as the gospel has spread to different countries, you know what it's brought? It's brought liberation for women. It's brought liberation for slaves. It's brought increase in scientific knowledge. It's no, the Christians, fundamentalist Christians, they want everybody to throw science out. Well, actually, some of the greatest scientists who ever lived were Christians. My point is that as the gospel is spreading, it's actually making a difference in many, many lives around the world. And who's building the great amount of hospitals around the world? Trace them back. Trace back the beginning of our great universities in America, the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons. Who started them? And the Oxfords and the Cambridges in England. Who started them? When there's a famine in the world, when there's an earthquake, a tsunami, different groups get involved. Israelis are famous for getting involved, but the vast majority of the relief comes from Christian organizations. There's actually a lot of good that's being done. Some of my friends went down to the south after terrible tornadoes a couple years back, and they said you look at the map of the city and half of it wiped out and half of it fine. And people were there on where their house was, and it's just a foundation. It's been wiped clean. Everything they had, just rubble, gone, or just the foundation just wiped clean. And there were all types of relief efforts taking place. And you know what was interesting? There were no atheist organizations with their trucks there. Atheists for Compassion. I'm not saying there are no atheists that care. I'm just saying that there were no atheist organizations whose trucks were there, but every kind of Christian organization was there, and people sacrificially working in the rubble to help. You see, the good news of Jesus the Messiah really does bring about change. And I can introduce you to people that were formerly violent people, formerly criminals, formerly drug addicts, formerly terrorists, formerly social derelicts who are now outstanding people making incredible contributions to their society. You say, well, I can introduce you to some of them in traditional Judaism. I'm not saying they don't exist anywhere else. I'm saying that the gospel of Jesus, Yeshua, brings about wonderful, tremendous, positive change, and it's spreading through the world. And as we get closer and closer to the end of the age, we are going to see an increase, parallel extremes, ever increasing wickedness, ever increasing righteousness, the darkness getting darker, the light getting brighter, a real separation, division, and then Messiah will come in the midst of it.